I arrived at Oakwood Meadows townhomes in the late summer, carrying boxes into my cozy two-story unit. Tucked amid lush oak trees and manicured lawns, the complex looked both serene and tightly regulated. Each townhouse facade matched in color scheme: beige siding, white trim, uniform shutters. My new unit, number 24B, occupied a corner lot with a small, fenced yard. Perfect, I thought, for quiet living. Neighbors seemed polite if somewhat reserved. A few waved as I unloaded the moving truck. One elderly man in a baseball cap offered a greeting, but vanished quickly when a woman in a pressed blouse walked by. I'd later learn she was Beatrice Arndt, but already known among longtime residents as Karen. She eyed me from a distance with an inscrutable smile, clipboard in hand. In my welcome packet, I spotted references to the Oakwood Meadows HOA, particularly praising Ms. Arndt's dedicated leadership. I shrugged, thinking it typical HOA language. That evening, I flipped through the bylaws, noticing an entire section titled Laundry Protocols. Strange, most HOAs discuss parking, noise, or landscaping, but not much about laundry. This, I'd soon find out, was only the tip of the iceberg. As I unpacked, I felt optimistic. The place was well maintained, neighbors presumably nice, and the oak trees outside promised a lovely canopy of autumn leaves. I had no inkling that Ms. Arndt's micromanagement of laundry hours would soon upend my routine, forcing me to fight back with a cunning, noisy solution each night. Within days, I met Ms. Arndt face to face. She appeared at my doorstep on a late afternoon, her posture impeccable, her short auburn hair neatly styled. She wore a crisp collared shirt, pressed slacks, and carried a binder labeled HOA Guidelines. A name tag read Beatrice Arndt, HOA Chair. "Welcome to Oakwood Meadows," she said, tone polite but edged. "I'm Ms. Arndt, the association's president, though some folks mistakenly call me Karen." She wrinkled her nose slightly, as if Karen offended her. I shook her hand. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I've started reviewing the bylaws, but it's quite a document." She gave a prim nod. "Yes, we take pride in our thoroughness. These rules ensure our community remains orderly. I trust you'll adhere to them." Her eyes flicked around my porch, noting a few boxes I'd left outside briefly. "We discourage extended placement of personal items in front entrances," she added, an unmistakable hint of scolding. "Please keep that in mind." I promised I'd clear them. She offered a thin smile. "We appreciate cooperation. Also, check Section 8 for laundry protocols. Some newcomers overlook that." With that, she pivoted and walked off. Slightly unsettled, I moved the boxes indoors. The neighbor across the way, Lily, whispered that Ms. Arndt had a thing for laundry rules, among other micromanaged topics. "Just be careful. She's known to blow small matters out of proportion." I shrugged, thinking no big deal. How complicated could laundry be? My illusions would soon shatter once Ms. Arndt unveiled her newly minted bedding laundry hour. Over the following weeks, I settled in, occasionally hearing stories about Ms. Arndt's laser focus on laundry. She'd once scolded a neighbor for hanging sheets to dry on a balcony, claiming it lowered property values by creating an eyesore. Another neighbor, who used a shared clothesline behind the townhomes, got a stern warning for leaving items out past an unspecified limit. People joked that Ms. Arndt must have a vendetta against laundry, or perhaps she had an extreme sense of aesthetic uniformity. The bylaws indeed had an entire section about approved drying methods, banning clothing lines in front yards, restricting them behind fences only, specifying no laundry visible from the street. Some rules even restricted the timing of laundry outside to daylight hours only, though the exact times were vague. Still, I found it odd that Ms. Arndt would micromanage something so mundane. The building's community email list teased a possible new rule on the horizon, rumored to revolve around bedding. No one knew specifics, but I braced for something bizarre. Sure enough, a formal notice soon landed in everyone's mailbox. "Attention residents, the HOA board, guided by Ms. Arndt, is evaluating a new policy regulating the times during which bedding, sheets, blankets, comforters may be laundered or hung to dry. A final decision will be announced next meeting." My jaw dropped. Restricting bedding laundry times? That sounded borderline dystopian. But Ms. Arndt apparently believed large bedding displayed on lines or railings was unsightly. She also claimed washing machines running at random times caused noise pollution. Some neighbors rolled their eyes. Others worried this might hamper their busy schedules. I stayed calm, hoping the board would moderate her extremes. Little did I know, Ms. Arndt had the board under her sway. The next HOA meeting arrived in the clubhouse lounge, a modest space with folding chairs and a small podium. Ms. Arndt presided, flanked by two board members who rarely contradicted her. Residents trickled in, curious about the rumored bedding laundry rule. I took a seat near Lily and a few others who were equally skeptical. Ms. Arndt opened with mundane updates about landscaping budgets, then cleared her throat. Now, regarding the revised laundry protocol. After careful consideration, the board has determined that bedding, such as sheets, blankets, comforters, can be laundered or hung outdoors only between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. daily. This one-hour window ensures minimal visual clutter and noise disruption. Outside that time frame, washing or drying bedding is prohibited. A collective gasp rippled. One neighbor raised her hand, exclaiming, "But that's ridiculous. Some of us work nights or have kids. We can't do bedding laundry in just 1 hour." Others joined in, citing schedules, or how washers alone often take an hour or more for a single load. Ms. Arndt simply repeated that it was for community harmony, and that neighbors could plan accordingly. Stunned, I realized she'd singled out bedding with no logical reason beyond aesthetics and noise. She insisted if bedding needed more than an hour to hang, one had to use a dryer or do it off-site. Another neighbor pointed out how not everyone had an in-unit dryer or wanted to pay for the communal dryers. Ms. Arndt dismissed these concerns, saying the policy was final. The board had voted. It would take effect next week. We left the meeting in dismay. Ms. Arndt wore a smug expression, confident she'd protected the neighborhood from the scourge of bedding. Lily declared it was the craziest rule she'd seen in an HOA. People felt powerless, as Ms. Arndt seemed to hold the board in her pocket, ignoring resident input. But I decided not to let it stand unchallenged. If she wanted to impose an insane laundry hour, I'd find a workaround. Driving home from the meeting, I ranted to Lily about the new rule's absurdity. She shook her head, exasperated. "I guess we can just wash bedding at 8 a.m. Saturday?" But for me, that was far from feasible. My job sometimes required early starts, plus I disliked being forced into a tiny window. Then a sly notion struck me. Ms. Arndt's rule specifically addressed when bedding can be laundered or hung. But what about simply using a machine dryer at any hour? The bylaws typically allowed laundry usage anytime, as long as noise curfews, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., were not violated at a certain decibel. My in-unit dryer was a powerful, older model that rumbled quite loudly, but still within legal noise levels. If Ms. Arndt wanted to limit bedding laundry hours to 8 to 9 a.m. for line drying or washing, I could ironically follow the letter of the rule: no line drying or washing outside the slot, while using my giant dryer at, say, 9 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. That was still before the 10 p.m. quiet hours. I'd double-check the decibel allowance. If I was within the limit, Ms. Arndt couldn't punish me. Yet the constant roar near bedtime might annoy her significantly, especially if our walls were adjacent. Yes, it was petty, but Ms. Arndt's rule was petty. If she insisted on restricting me to an impossible laundry schedule, I'd retaliate with a perfectly legal tactic that would highlight how ridiculous her policy was. Maybe that relentless dryer noise would spur her to realize the rule was harming her comfort. Ironically, before launching my plan, I carefully reviewed Oakwood Meadows noise guidelines. The official curfew was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., meaning loud noises after 10 p.m. could attract violations. But if I started my dryer at 9 or 9:15 p.m., it would run for about 45 to 60 minutes, finishing just before 10 p.m. As long as the dryer's noise level stayed under a certain decibel threshold, I was within my rights. The bylaws specified general quiet enjoyment, but typically washers and dryers used before 10 p.m. were permitted. I tested my dryer's noise from outside my unit. It hummed heavily, the drum thumping a bit if overfilled, possibly irritating but not necessarily exceeding the limit. If Ms. Arndt tried measuring decibels, she'd find it borderline but still legal. Good. This was key. Next, I made sure my bedding was thoroughly singled out for machine drying. I'd run the wash cycle right at 8:50 p.m., which might be iffy with the new rules wording about washing bedding, but I reasoned that the rule stated Bedding may only be laundered or hung outdoors between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. Did it strictly ban washing inside at other times, or only line drying? The language was ambiguous, but I suspected Ms. Arndt intended any laundering at all to be restricted, though the official text might be open to interpretation. I decided to interpret launder or hang as referring specifically to line drying or the timing of the process, not the usage of a dryer. Even if Ms. Arndt objected, I'd argue the rule was poorly worded. My tactic: put the bedding in the washer around 8:45 or 9 p.m., so it completed by 9:30 p.m. Then pop it in the dryer, letting it rumble away until just before 10 p.m. All within my unit. No line drying, no violation of quiet hours. Meanwhile, Ms. Arndt's bedroom, I learned from Lily, was next door, so she'd definitely hear the rumble. 2 days after the new rule took effect, I deliberately postponed changing my bedding until a weekday evening. Usually, I might do it on a weekend morning, but now I wanted Ms. Arndt to experience the inconvenience. She likely relaxed after dinner, maybe watching TV or reading in bed by 9 p.m. Perfect timing. I loaded my king-size comforter into the washer at 8:50 p.m. The machine quietly swished. By 9:25, it finished. Then I stuffed the still damp bedding into my older, large-capacity dryer. I turned the dial to high heat. The dryer roared to life with a deep hum, vibrating slightly against the shared wall. I smiled, imagining Ms. Arndt scowling next door. Sure enough, around 9:40 p.m., I heard a sharp knock on my door. I paused the dryer. Ms. Arndt stood in the hallway, arms folded. "You're violating the new policy," she snapped, eyes flashing. "Bedding laundry is restricted to the morning hour." I feigned innocence. "But the rule states we can't hang or wash bedding outside that hour. I'm using my dryer inside. That's not line drying or doing it outside the allocated time, is it? The bylaws permit machine usage before 10 p.m., correct?" She sputtered. "It's implied that bedding laundry altogether is limited to 8 to 9 a.m. You're obviously ignoring the spirit of the rule, and the noise is disturbing me." Calmly, I pointed to the clock reading 9:41 p.m. "We're before quiet hours, so I'm not in violation of noise rules. If you want, we can get a decibel meter to confirm." Her mouth opened, then closed. She must have realized she lacked a direct bylaw to cite. The new rule was poorly worded, focusing on when bedding can be hung or laundered, but it never explicitly banned in-unit dryer usage at night, nor did it override general noise guidelines allowing normal household appliances until 10 p.m. Finally, Ms. Arndt hissed, "This is unacceptable. I will see to it the board clarifies the rule further." With that, she stormed off. I resumed the dryer. About 15 minutes later, it finished around 9:55 p.m., well within the allowed time frame. I folded my fresh comforter with a grin. True to her word, Ms. Arndt emailed the community the next morning. "Residents must abide by the spirit of the new bedding laundry policy. We have an unfortunate situation of individuals machine drying bedding at times outside the 8 to 9 a.m. window. We will expedite an amendment to ban such circumventing. Meanwhile, please respect the intent. Bedding laundry is only for 8 to 9 a.m. This caused an uproar on the community message board. Many pointed out Ms. Arndt had no legal ground to ban normal dryer use before 10 p.m. Some found it outrageous that she'd try to micromanage appliances inside private units. One post read, "What's next? Controlling our dinner cooking times." Another joked, "Karen wants to ensure we only eat breakfast from 8 to 9 a.m. 2. Amused, I watched Ms. Arndt's frustration mount. She scheduled an emergency board meeting for the upcoming Friday, presumably to pass an addendum banning nighttime machine drying of bedding. But some neighbors vowed to attend and protest. Ms. Arndt was about to face serious backlash. Meanwhile, I kept up my nighttime dryer routine whenever I needed to wash bedding. Each time, she'd pound on my door, and I'd politely remind her I wasn't breaking quiet hours. Her rage was almost comical. Word spread that Ms. Arndt was pushing for a total ban on bedding laundry outside her designated hour, covering washers, dryers, any method. The community responded with indignation. People posted on the building's private forum that many residents lacked flexible 8 a.m. schedules or found that hour unworkable. Some had shift jobs, some had large families needing laundry at varied times. Lily and a few others organized a petition to demand the board reconsider. Over 50 signatures poured in. Some even threatened to escalate to legal action if Ms. Arndt tried restricting private appliance usage. Ms. Arndt insisted the board was united, but behind the scenes, not all members agreed. A board member named Carlos confided to Lily that Ms. Arndt had pressured them to pass the rule. We regret it, but she bulldozed us with her fear tactics about noise and unsightly bedding, he said. By the time the emergency board meeting arrived, tension simmered. I felt a surge of excitement, knowing my dryer ploy had catalyzed a broader revolt. Ms. Arndt's attempt at clarifying the rule might backfire if enough residents demanded sense. Some neighbors half-joked about bringing bed sheets to wave at the meeting in protest. On Friday evening, the community lounge filled with more residents than usual. Ms. Arndt sat at the center table, flanked by two board members, Carlos and Ms. Lee. Another seat remained empty, some absent board member. Ms. Arndt wore a crisp blazer, her posture rigid, exuding confidence. But I glimpsed a flicker of unease in her eyes as she scanned the sizable, annoyed crowd. She opened with pleasantries, then dove into the main topic. We are here to reinforce the bedding laundry policy. Some individuals have tried circumventing the rule by using dryers at night, causing disturbance. We must ensure compliance by clarifying that any bedding washing or drying is restricted to 8 to 9 a.m. This includes machine usage. A wave of murmurs escalated. Lily stood up, brandishing the petition. We, the undersigned, strongly oppose such an overreaching rule. People have different schedules, and no existing noise bylaw is violated if someone uses a dryer before 10 p.m. Ms. Arndt, you cannot unilaterally override the standard quiet hour policies. Applause erupted. Another neighbor demanded, show us actual noise complaints besides Ms. Arndt's. If the dryer is under decibel limits and ends before quiet hours, it's allowed. Ms. Arndt tried to retort about community harmony. She cited vague anecdotes of neighbors awakened by machines. But when pressed for specifics, she faltered. Carlos, the board member, finally spoke. Chairwoman, I must mention the numerous negative responses we've received. It appears we don't have majority support for expanding the ban to machine usage. Ms. Lee nodded in agreement. Ms. Arndt's face stiffened. She insisted the board had a duty to uphold the original spirit of the rule, bedding laundry only at 8 to 9 a.m. But the audience booed. People pointed out how insane it was to expect an entire load of bedding to wash, rinse, and dry within that single hour. Ms. Arndt's defense that one can do multiple loads on different days fell flat. In the end, Ms. Lee proposed a formal vote. Should we expand the bedding laundry restriction to cover machine usage at all times outside 8 to 9 a.m.? The result? Ms. Arndt alone voted yes. Ms. Lee and Carlos voted no. The measure failed. The crowd cheered, Ms. Arndt's cheeks flushing red. With her expansion blocked, Ms. Arndt tried to salvage the existing rule, claiming the original 8 to 9 a.m. restriction on bedding laundry still stands. But the board realized the fiasco. The policy was unworkable, widely hated, and overshadowed by the noise bylaw that permitted normal machine usage before 10 p.m. Under pressure from the community and the fiasco at the meeting, Ms. Arndt's hold slipped. Finally, Ms. Lee made a motion. Given the confusion and widespread objections, I propose we revisit and repeal the entire bedding laundry rule, returning to prior guidelines. We can address concerns about large items on lines in a more balanced manner. Applause exploded. Carlos seconded the motion. Ms. Arndt, cornered, could only watch as the majority voted to revoke the new rule. The room erupted in celebration. Lily and other neighbors grinned ear to ear. I felt a surge of triumph, my sly nighttime dryer tactic indirectly fueling this outcome. Ms. Arndt, lips pressed thin, hammered the gavel to close the meeting, her face betraying anger and embarrassment. Our community had turned on her controlling approach, ensuring we could once again do bedding laundry whenever needed. In the days following, Ms. Arndt tried small acts of retaliation. She posted a sign about excessive dryer noise in the hallway, referencing no specific unit but obviously targeting me. She threatened to find evidence that my dryer exceeded decibel levels. I responded by welcoming an inspection. My machine was normal, operating well within typical home appliance noise. She also left me a pink notice claiming my yard fence needed urgent repainting, though I'd just moved in and it was in perfect shape. When I politely questioned her basis, she mumbled about fading paint, but no official standard existed for that. I reminded her that any major exterior painting was done by the HOA, not individual owners. Her threat evaporated. Neighbors assured me Ms. Arndt was thrashing about in frustration, having lost the bedding laundry war. Lily joked that I'd become Ms. Arndt's arch-nemesis, but the entire building was on my side. Freed from the 8 to 9 a.m. nonsense, folks happily resumed normal schedules. If Ms. Arndt disliked my dryer humming at 9 p.m., tough luck, she had no rule to stop me. With the bedding laundry rule officially revoked, the community breathed easier. Some neighbors thanked me for my indirect role in toppling Ms. Arndt's plan. My nighttime dryer protests highlighted how ridiculous her rule was. I insisted it was a group effort. Without everyone pushing back, Ms. Arndt might have succeeded. The board, newly emboldened by Ms. Lee and Carlos's stand, started adopting a less rigid approach to petty restrictions. They focused on real issues, like repairing a cracked sidewalk near the playground, scheduling tree trimming, and updating the community center's HVAC. Ms. Arndt remained board chair, but her influence waned. Ms. Lee, especially, spoke up more often. The dynamic had shifted, reducing Ms. Arndt's ability to micromanage. Meanwhile, I continued my normal laundry routine, washing bedding whenever I needed, sometimes at night if my schedule demanded. Ms. Arndt occasionally glared from across the walkway, but never confronted me again. If she complained, the board paid no heed. The fiasco taught them that the community rejected oppressive rules. About a month after the rule's repeal, I found Ms. Arndt in the courtyard, looking pensive. We'd barely spoken since the meeting. Gathering courage, I approached, offering a polite, "Good morning." She nodded curtly. I sensed tension, but also a flicker of regret in her expression. I tried to ease the atmosphere. "It's a relief the laundry confusion is behind us. Hopefully, we can move on." She exhaled. "I suppose so. I only wanted to maintain order. People hanging large bedding or running noisy machines at odd hours, it felt disruptive." She paused, but I realized the 1-hour rule was ill-conceived. That sounded almost like an admission. I nodded softly. "I understand wanting tidiness, but folks need flexibility. Life is messy." She gave a faint, tight smile. "Yes, well, the board overruled me. I hope you're satisfied." Her tone still carried resentment, but also an undercurrent of resignation. I realized Ms. Arndt might have personal reasons for her controlling ways. Maybe an upbringing in a strict environment or anxiety about chaos. Regardless, she seemed to sense she'd lost the battle. I offered a small olive branch. "If you ever want to discuss ways to keep the neighborhood neat without restricting daily life, I'm open." She said nothing more, just nodded and walked off. It wasn't a heartfelt reconciliation, but it was something. Perhaps, in her own way, Ms. Arndt recognized the community wouldn't tolerate her extremes. Neighbors decided to host a casual backyard barbecue to celebrate the end of the laundry fiasco and the approach of summer. We called it the Laundry Liberation Cookout, a playful nod to the now-defunct bedding rule. Lily volunteered her spacious yard, and about 20 residents gathered, sharing potluck dishes and laughter. People joked about bringing their bedsheets as picnic blankets. Some actually did, ironically. Others teased me for my brilliant nighttime dryer scheme, calling me cunning. I insisted it was a last resort. The fiasco had spurred a sense of unity, forging deeper bonds among neighbors who once kept to themselves. Even the board members came, except Ms. Arndt, who politely declined. We guessed she was still bitter. As the sun set, a warm sense of accomplishment filled the air. This once quiet, disjointed community had discovered the power of collective resistance and comedic defiance. We realized we didn't have to yield to petty tyranny. If Ms. Arndt tried something similarly restrictive again, we knew how to stand together. Over the next few months, the HOA board functioned more democratically. Ms. Lee and Carlos led efforts to update rules for clarity, removing archaic language about laundry lines. They introduced fair guidelines that balanced aesthetics with practicality. No unapproved changes to the facade, but normal household tasks were left to owners' discretion. Ms. Arndt, while still on the board, found herself outvoted if she proposed anything too restrictive. Residents felt freer. Some put small flower pots on balconies without fear of immediate pink notes. Others adjusted their routines without worrying about Ms. Arndt's sudden demands. The tension that once gripped Oakwood Meadows lifted, replaced by a more neighborly atmosphere. Now and then, Ms. Arndt tried to reassert control in minor ways, like complaining about lawn chairs left out too long. But she no longer had the final say. The board typically asked for community feedback or voted it down if it was too extreme. Freed from her stifling approach, Oakwood Meadows thrived. While the community soared with its newfound openness, Ms. Arndt grew more isolated. Her old strategy of intimidation and unilateral rulemaking no longer worked. Residents politely tolerated her presence, but rarely sought her input. She'd sometimes mention new concerns at board meetings, only to see them calmly refuted or tabled for more data. She must have felt her authority slip away. Some neighbors pitied her, guessing she derived self-worth from controlling the environment. Others felt she deserved the snub after her laundry fiasco. Lily commented that Ms. Arndt's frosty demeanor might hide loneliness. But bridging that gap was tough after all the conflict she caused. For my part, I harbored no lasting grudge. I simply reveled in the ability to do my bedding laundry whenever. Some nights, if I started a late dryer cycle, I caught myself smirking, remembering how Ms. Arndt once pounded on my door. Now she couldn't do anything about it. The comedic satisfaction lingered, though I tried not to gloat. One afternoon, Ms. Arndt left a short note in my mailbox. I'm scheduling a meeting to discuss a potential new approach to shared laundry spaces. If interested, please attend next Tuesday at 5 p.m. in the lounge. B. Arndt. Curious, I attended. The meeting was small, just Ms. Arndt, 2 board members, and a few residents. Ms. Arndt proposed upgrading the communal laundry room so folks without in-unit machines had better facilities, a more efficient dryer, and maybe a separate area for large bedding if they wanted to line dry indoors. She argued it would reduce the eyesore of bedding outdoors. It wasn't a bad idea. I was surprised she'd put forth something constructive. She made no mention of restricting usage times, only clarifying that the space should remain quiet after 10 p.m. Ms. Lee supported it, emphasizing it was voluntary for residents. We realized Ms. Arndt was trying to reconcile her obsession with neatness with the reality that people needed flexible laundry solutions. The board agreed to investigate costs, signifying a new, more cooperative Ms. Arndt approach. It felt like a small step toward redemption for Ms. Arndt. Sure, it might still reflect her aesthetic fixations, but at least she was no longer forcibly banning bedding laundry at normal hours. Perhaps the fiasco taught her to compromise. Over the next couple of months, the board hammered out details. With Ms. Arndt's input and community feedback, they decided to renovate the old laundry room, adding a high-capacity washer and dryer specifically for bedding or large loads. The idea was to provide an attractive alternative for those who disliked in-unit drying or wanted faster results. The new machines would be available from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., aligning with noise guidelines, but no narrower 1-hour window. Funded partly by HOA reserves and small monthly dues, the project launched. Residents marveled that Ms. Arndt was actually working collaboratively, not imposing. The once bitter memory of her bedding laundry fiasco faded as the community embraced the new amenity. Even I occasionally used the big communal dryer for extra-large comforters. Ms. Arndt, ironically, oversaw the project meticulously, ensuring it was neatly installed, like a new pet project that earned her back some respect. Life at Oakwood Meadows calmed. With the communal laundry upgrade, Ms. Arndt found a positive outlet for her organizational zeal. She supervised cleaning schedules, posted friendly reminders about dryer courtesy, but not in a threatening way. The board, Ms. Lee and Carlos in particular, kept her in check if she strayed toward old habits. Residents were relieved. No more pink notes for minor infractions, no more bizarre rules about laundry hours. I resumed my normal routine, bedding washes whenever I felt like it, sometimes at night, sometimes midday. The shrill drama of Ms. Arndt's 8 to 9 fiasco felt like a distant memory. Occasionally, neighbors joked about how I used my giant dryer of doom to overthrow Ms. Arndt's tyranny. We'd all chuckle, though I insisted the entire building's pushback was crucial. Meanwhile, Ms. Arndt, though still somewhat frosty, realized she couldn't revert to her old ways without inciting rebellion. She seemed to settle for partial acceptance, receiving cautious praise for the improved communal laundry. If she occasionally eyed me with annoyance, I answered with a polite nod. The tension dissipated over time. In midsummer, the board organized a block party in Oakwood Meadows' central green space. Families brought potluck dishes, kids played yard games, and local musicians performed. It was the biggest community event in years, signifying a renewed sense of togetherness. Ms. Lee gave a short speech praising how neighbors overcame difficulties, referencing the new, more flexible environment. I couldn't help but recall that less than a year ago, Ms. Arndt's laundry rule threatened to overshadow daily life. Now, residents danced, chatted, and devoured barbecue under the warm sun. Ms. Arndt herself was present, handing out pamphlets about the updated laundry room. She wore a cordial smile, though she mostly lingered at the info booth. People approached politely, not fearful. She engaged them in mild conversation about the washer's capacity. It struck me how dramatically the climate had changed. My nighttime dryer protest, a cunning compliance that abided by the letter but not the spirit of Ms. Arndt's rule, had catalyzed a turning point. Freed from oppressive micro-regulations, Oakwood Meadows flourished. The block party symbolized our community's capacity to unify against unreasonable constraints. Months later, as autumn approached again, I reflected on the entire saga. The memory of Ms. Arndt banging on my door, outraged by my dryer's rumble, still brought a wry smile. I'd never intended to wage war, but her inflexible approach forced me to find a loophole. That simple act, running my dryer in a perfectly legal time slot, exposed the folly of her bedding laundry hour. Once the board realized how unfeasible it was, the rule crumbled, and Ms. Arndt's hold on the community weakened. In the end, Oakwood Meadows thrived more than ever. The new communal laundry area satisfied those who disliked in-unit washers, while the rest of us enjoyed freedom to do laundry whenever. Ms. Arndt, though no longer revered, found modest acceptance in her new role, a detail-focused board member with limited power. The entire building overcame the conflict with minimal lasting bitterness. Just comedic stories about how Karen tried to ban bedding laundry, but we used bigger dryers. Lily once said, "I admire your willingness to poke the bear." We needed that push. Otherwise, we might still be living under bizarre laundry curfews. I realized it was a collective effort. My rebellious approach was merely the spark. The real transformation came from neighbors uniting, the board reevaluating, and Ms. Arndt eventually conceding. At last, Oakwood Meadows found balance. Ms. Arndt's attempt to impose a narrow bedding laundry hour ended in comedic failure, replaced by a more open-minded HOA stance. Residents were free to wash sheets at night, line dry them if they chose, within reason, or use the new communal machines. No one dreaded a pink note or confrontation over trifling matters. The blockade of fear was lifted. One crisp evening, as I folded my fresh laundry after a late wash, I gazed out my living room window, seeing lights glimmer from neighbors' homes. I felt grateful for the sense of community we built. Ms. Arndt might still prowl with her clipboard sometimes, but she no longer wielded the same intimidation. We'd proven that petty rules could be undone when people stand firm and use a dash of cunning. And so the story ends. My nighttime dryer rumbled away Ms. Arndt's misguided rule, letting me, and everyone else, reclaim normal laundry freedom. The moral is simple yet profound. Even in the face of rigid authority, a bit of clever defiance, community unity, and unwavering resolve can melt the frostiest attempts at control. Oakwood Meadows emerged happier. Ms. Arndt's overreach was checked, and we all learned that true harmony arises when rules serve convenience, not the vanity of a Karen.